Bună ziua, doamnelor și domnilor! Începem anul cu un interviu și cu un moment special pe CaleaEuropeana.ro. Aniversăm astăzi 62 de ani de la momentul sublim de reconciliere franco-germană, 62 de ani de la semnarea Tratatului de la Élysée între Franța și Germania, un moment definitoriu pentru istoria acestui parteneriat între țările puternice ale Uniunii Europene, un parteneriat care, iată, a contat foarte mult pentru viitorul Uniunii Europene. Monsieur l'ambassadeur Varneri, bonjour et merci d'avoir accordé cet interview à CaleaEuropeana à l'occasion de l'anniversaire du traité de Élysée. Merci beaucoup. Herr Botschafter Gebauer, guten Tag und vielen Dank, dass Sie CaleaEuropeana.ro anlässlich des Jahrestages des Élysée-Vertrags dieses Interview gewähren. Vielen Dank. So, dear ambassadors, as I mentioned, today we are celebrating the 62th anniversary of the Élysée Treaty, but also the sixth anniversary of the Aachen Treaty that put Germany and France together on a reconciliation path and on a partnership for Europe. For most of EU's history, France and Germany were perceived as the powerhouse of the European Union, the giants that drive the EU forward and that forge unity through crisis. Now the EU confronts with both domestic and foreign challenges. We've seen them: disinformation, extremism, economic problems. Some of them coming also from its most important founders. So where does this anniversary moment find the German-French partnership and the European Union as a whole? Ambassador Varneri.
Well, by definition, an anniversary comes every year. So we might have the feeling of some kind of routine. Every year this anniversary comes back and again. But it would be a big mistake, because this very specific relation is absolutely extraordinary. At any level, every day, on any subject, we talk on many, many things in capitals, in Brussels, I mean in NATO and in European Union, everywhere, and elsewhere in the world. I mean, because I served in Africa, I served in Asia, and my German colleague was always my closest colleague under these geographies and under these topics. So we must never forget that. And something which is absolutely extraordinary: did you realize that a few weeks ago, when there was this terrible hurricane in Mayotte, it was a Bundeskanzler, the Chancellor, who represented France in the European Council. I thought I made a mistake. I read it again. I checked. It was the right thing. I didn't know myself. So you see how extraordinary it is. And in this very specific period that we are living now, with so many challenges, we are going to talk about them in the conversation. We have many things to discuss together, many compromises to find, many common positions to find. I'm sure about that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think this jubilee, this anniversary, is always a good occasion to, first of all, be grateful for what we have achieved. I think the French-German reconciliation is an extraordinary historical achievement which cannot be valued high enough. After centuries of being opponents, enemies, of bitter wars, we have finally overcome this opposition and have now joined forces, and we have achieved so much already. So it's always a very pleasant day, and I'm very happy. Thanks, Nicolas, for also again doing this together with me, just to celebrate this day also here in Bucharest, also the framework of this interview. And coming to your questions, yes, of course, France, Germany, Europe as a whole, we are facing a number of challenges, but I think we are ready to tackle them. We are ready to address them, and we can best do this if we continue this very important French-German cooperation.
You mentioned Chancellor Scholz representing France at the last European Council, and I must say that over this history, we had on the one side Chancellor Adenauer, Kohl, Merkel, or Scholz, Presidents de Gaulle, Mitterrand, Chirac, or Macron working together with common vision, or despite different views, they work together, and we see how they forge compromise for European integration. But that impetus, or maybe just that impression, has faded away over recent years. If we take as example topics like tariffs on electric cars, like the Draghi report on the future of European competitiveness, like nuclear energy, like common debt in defense and others. How do you see French and German leadership? Do you see it more divided? And how does this affect the European Union?
I think the impression might be somewhat incomplete that we have a greater division now. There are so many decisions and so many issues at stake, and that I would say 99% Germany and France are completely in sync when it comes to dealing with the developments in the Middle East, in Syria, for example. When it comes to supporting Ukraine, EU enlargement, we are very much on the same page. So it's a phenomenon in general that only once there is a disagreement or different views, then of course this makes news. So the impression is there that Germany and France are not on agreement anymore. I think we basically are. The fact that we are having discussions on some issues is something completely normal. Friendship and cooperation does not mean that you automatically have to have the same opinion. It means that you have a process of finding a common ground, areas where we are working on. You have mentioned in your question. So I sense that we are not in a difficult situation for French-German partnership and cooperation, but we are in constant need to see how we can best contribute as two countries, as a German-French engine, to the development of the European Union. We are doing this. Nicolas has pointed out to this agreement of representing one another in the European Council if the other leaders is not available. And there are so many other formats where it's just unique how closely we cooperate that I have no doubt that we are in a good shape when it comes to our joint cooperation in the future.
Yeah, because we are covering so many subjects that it's pretty normal that we have 10% or 20% on which we disagree. But the important thing is not to disagree or to agree. The important thing is to have a method, which is now quite old, to discuss every day, like I said before, at any level, everywhere, on any subjects, and to reach compromise, to reach not always common positions, but compromise that make us able to share with other partners, either in union or in the alliance, and we just reach common positions. Up to now, we never failed to do so. So the method is there. The will is there. Of course, characters, persons are very different. We had, how many chancellors did you have since the 50s, and how many presidents did we have? So many different situations occurred, but they always work together, always.
Yeah, there was a time when we had just one German chancellor and few French presidents, and now we have the same French president that is preparing maybe for the third chancellor in his era.
It's an exception.
Yeah, it's an exception. Good one. And I've mentioned that because my next question goes on the electoral moment, to put it this way, because we had 2024 that came with significant change for Europe, and it was a year that everyone was considering that it's the biggest electoral test, and then we will move forward with policies and projects. And although the pro-European majority was saved in the European Parliament, also thanks to pro-European forces from France and Germany, and we have these new EU institutions, leadership from Germany, from France, and so on. Both the founding countries of the EU together with the other four, but these two, particularly France and Germany, were hit by the erosion of liberal democracy, to put it this way, were attacked by extremism, by disinformation campaigns, and so on. And we've seen that moderate, centrist, and liberal establishment has lost traction, while the extreme right has gained political weight, both in Germany and both in France, when we look at the European elections. And now we have German snap elections, so another electoral very important, where President Macron is struggling to keep a powerful government, a pro and stable majority in France. These moments of democracy and issues and the pressure of disinformation, of extremism in France and Germany, should we feel worried about them? It will affect Europe moving forward?
Well, I guess our three countries are facing the same kind of situation. We've got
Romania now.
Yes, our three countries. We had elections, or we will have elections, or we might have again elections in our case. So we are in a sort of very intense democratic period, which is good in itself, but which is tricky, because you're right, there is this populist wave, these populist speeches, and these hybrid attacks. Now we all know that there has been an hybrid attack, at least here in the Romanian election in November, and that just like there was also attacks in France in 2017 for the first election of President Macron, it was not the same kind of attack, but it was something which was, everybody has forgotten that. But
there are similarities.
No, it's a bit different, but it's the same, probably the same actor, because Russians, obviously it was Russians, they stole, if I can say so, mails on the internal mail system of a candidate Macron, who was not present at that time, and they put it on internet just the day before the election. It was nothing too specific, but it was exchanges between personalities, little conflicts, little things like that. And it was the proof. We entered in your house, we did what we want, we stole what we want, and we put it on internet. It was a kind of hybrid attack also. Just like we suffered some of other attacks. I mentioned that because it's important. It's not only Moldova, Georgia or Romania, it's everywhere in Europe. We had these David stars painted on the walls of Paris. We had these little coffins put at the Eiffel Tower. And we had rumors about things in hotels linked to Moldovan refugees, etc. So we suffered, I insist, a few months ago in Paris of hybrid attacks that we think the Russians are at the origin of. So we are all facing this kind of thing, and we are all facing, coming back to your precise question, the populist speeches about the weakness of European Union, NATO, the danger of war, etc., etc. We must stand to our values. We must remember that what is at stake is the security of our countries, of our continent, that we must stick to our solidarity within European Union, within alliance. We must insist with the Americans, there is a new leadership, like you know, who is arriving. We must insist on the importance of having the Ukrainians and Europe at the table of negotiations, if there are negotiations this year, which is a possible scenario, and we must never give up our values, our protection, our defense, our will to protect ourselves. Because if we lose this will, we will lose everything, our freedom, our sovereignty, and it will be terrible, simply. So we are facing difficult times, yes, all our free countries, but we are facing that together. Up to now, we are together.
Absolutely, and it would be absolutely unwise and false to simply give in and simply give up, as you've outlined. If you look at the European elections you've been referring to, of course, we have also seen a rise in anti-establishment parties there. But nevertheless, our institutions, in this case in Europe, were able to forge a new government, a new leadership and a new commission, which is now operating, which has many challenges and of course has to deliver. But it shows that despite this maybe shift or the rise in anti-establishment parties, nationalist, populist movements, our systems are strong enough to still make room for decision makers to take responsibility. And again, the most decisive point in this challenging time, it is a challenging time, is to now make sure that our leaders deliver on the very needs of the populations.
And there is one paradox, it's when you see the history of European Union, it's always when we faced terrible challenges, terrible difficulties, that we were able, paradoxically enough, to make progress.
That's very true.
I don't know how and why, but that's the result of the history.
Yeah,
that's our sort of tradition.
It is, and another perception I always make is, whenever you look at Europe at any individual point in time, you have a feeling that Europe has never been in a more terrible situation. You always, any time throughout my life, if you looked at what shape Europe is in, people would have told me, "Oh, it's terrible right now. This is a big crisis." But if you look at Europe a bit from the bird's eye perspective, in the long run, you will see that it has been over the decades, an extraordinary historical success, bringing peace and stability to Europe. So we must not forget that looking at a specific moment in time, you might see only problems, but looking at a broader period in time, you will see the effects of what we have in Europe and in terms of European integration, and that is a very positive one, and we should make sure that we'll keep it that way.
But touching on that, isn't this also the let's say the effect of the gravity on political discourse? Because we've seen recently the president of Finland, Mr. Stubb, who was saying, and probably he's right, that the vacation, Europe is over from its vacation of history. I mean, Europe needs to answer the call of being more sovereign, more strategic, more economic security.
Very true.
Of course, the terms are different. You prefer economic security, you prefer strategic sovereignty.
We like all the security.
They are the same. So
absolutely.
when we see political leaders having this gravity in discourses, how can we think different, that there is not the worst moment in history? And you know that there was a joke a few years ago, welcome to the European Union, where for every crisis we have a summit. So maybe on that...
We are facing difficult times, that's true, but what can we do? I mean, did we decide to have a war of aggression in Ukraine? Did we decide to have a new conception of American policy? Did we vote in November? No, we are facing the situation that we are facing, and we have to react properly. That's our task, that's our mission.
And you're right, of course, Robert, when you say it's not a time to just ignore the challenges and say, well, we've always been able to manage and we don't have to do anything. Yes, we have to do a whole lot to be able to successfully overcome these challenges ahead of us. So indeed, it is a specific moment in time. I don't want to downplay that. But the point is that we often underestimate the ability of the EU to be able to deliver. And that's something that should give us some confidence. But again, it should not give us a feeling of, I don't have to do anything. It should incite us to now take bold and decisive action. So the Finnish president, of course, is right when he says, now this is the time to deliver.
And same thing on climate, same thing on the oceans, same thing on demography, and on any big issues that we are facing, not only security, not only Ukraine.
I've identified, let's say, 4 layers or 4 topics that are very much discussed in these days, and they are important when we look both at the European and transatlantic stage. And we see some key words like competitiveness, like defense, like Donald Trump, like Ukraine. We have the rise of these extremism forces and also the power of disinformation. And my first question is linked to the Mario Draghi report on the future of European competitiveness, which everyone or some people tend to see it as the problem fixer in the European Union. We had the Budapest Declaration on the European competitiveness deal that all the leaders of the EU endorsed. But when this report came out, we had President Macron. I believe he was in Berlin when he warned about that. He said that the EU might die if we do not take this moment and this report very serious with the issues that it provides, like energy, like defense, like the chain of supplies, and so on. While some German lawmakers were saying that, well, France is trapped in a Franco-French geopolitical mindset. So this is another layer where we as press, as mass media, as think tankers see that France and Germany are not on the same page. And I want to know from you, where are the pieces where France and Germany align in this driving forward for European competitiveness, and where they don't? Where do you align when it comes to the EU competitiveness? And
I think it's more a difference in terms of political culture. Our president, and he's facing the situation on an everyday basis now in France, knows that to stimulate us, to motivate his people, French people, he has to sort of dramatize from time to time the situation, because we are facing difficult times in France. And he knows that it's the best way probably to motivate us.
And see people engaged.
Yes. So when he sometimes has strong statements, it's probably, you're right, also for internal reasons. It's not to provocate anybody, but it's to stimulate people, And the second factor, he likes to promote ideas and to provoke the debate among the Union, among NATO, among G7, etc., etc. So for these 2 reasons, he provokes some kinds of reaction. I don't see really on this topic differences on the real issue itself. I'm not sure that there is really difference. Of course, probably your chancellor has not the same kind of behavior, same kind of political life, culture, and it's a different. We can see that, for example, let me take this example. We have a terrible difficulty in France to reach again what we were excellent at years before, this compromise tradition in terms of internal policy. We are not able to do it anymore in National Assembly, apparently. We have this tradition. You have still this tradition. So it's normal that the reaction is not the same. You see?
Yeah, I would agree with you what you said. It's often a style issue of style, a question of style. Different politicians have different styles. There are also German politicians that use more outspoken words to maybe wake up people or that to make their point more clear. So I wouldn't also put too much importance to differences in style of communications. When it comes to Draghi report and competitiveness, I think there are a number of key elements that you've also outlined where we are fully in sync. There's a tremendous need when it comes to deregulating and debureaucratizing our systems. We have overdeveloped our regulational schemes. Why? Because we always felt there's a good reason for having another element here and there to make justice even more precise, which has always been meant well. The result obviously is leading to having too much of this bureaucracy, which hinders our competitiveness. So there's an agreement amongst all of us that we need to cut back, and to cut back boldly. The second element is, of course, that we need to strengthen our European industrial base, our European defense industrial base, our European capacity, basically, because we have come to realize that relying on supply chains, in particular, if you are depending on countries that are politically at odds with you, this might backfire in times of crisis. So it's obviously a need to not rely on Russian fossil fuels or on Chinese technological products, because you never know when there'll be a cut in the supply chain. And that's what we are very, very decisively working on.
It started the year with the issue with Gazprom, Ukraine, and so on, and we see that's a topic.
Yeah, it is a topic. It's been a topic for Germany, for all of Europe. Right now you see what's going on in the Republic of Moldova. Relying on Russian fossil fuels backfires.
Germany is a very good example that has learned.
Yeah, we had to learn our lesson, and it's been fortunately possible for us to cut back to zero in a rather short period of time. That's the reality, and that's something we need to all do when it comes to making ourselves less dependent on others. De-risking is a term that is often used for that, and I think this is crucial.
Our priorities are clearly now, I'm coming back from the conference, the annual conference of the ambassadors. Our priorities within Europe is simplification, because we are now in a complexity system which people refuse. Yes, absolutely. Sovereignty, industrial and defense security, energy, and defense. I mean, defense to defend our liberty, our freedom, our democracy.
And that fully echoes what we have as priorities in Germany. So you can see there is a complete overlap in terms of our strategies.
Maybe when we look at the Draghi report, we have some special keywords. I mean, there are all of them: cutting the red tape, reforming, and also fresh money. Because everyone was focusing on fresh money, because Mario Draghi said that we need an incentive of over and investments of over 800 billions. And considering that we have a 7-year multi-annual budget of 1,000 billions, and you need just 800 for 1 year, well, that's quite a lot. So it's not just about fresh money, as I get it from you. It's also about simplification and about...
Absolutely. Sure. The fresh money, it would be very easy if you could just print the money and have it, right? But this is not an economically feasible move. In order to spend money, you need to have an economic base that enables you to then spend it. So this is why it's a bit more complicated to make sure that at the same time you're investing in your future, but you're not just printing money and throwing out your monetary base. So, well, here we are. Politics is complicated, but there are smart minds in Europe that will certainly make good decisions and take us forward.
The goal is to invest to regain our complete sovereignty in terms of industry, defense, agriculture, energy. So fresh money, okay, but also will, and we have, I agree, to produce to get some money. We have to produce first to gain money, to export, and then to gain money. You see, the money is not coming from the sky. The money is coming from our labor, our work.
The reason why I insisted with money and fresh money is because the discussion about strategic sovereignty when it comes to defense also lies a lot in the public debate on money. And we know that there is a new era, of course. We have the first EU Commissioner for Defense. Right. We expect more initiatives coming up, like the first White Charter of Defense that the Commission needs to propose in the first 100 days of the new mandate. We have a lot of leaders that say that we need to prepare for a war-footing economy. Even President Macron said that last year in 2024. Former President of the European Council, Charles Michel, had the same idea. The Polish presidency of the EU Council, with its motto "Security Europe," has said that one thing that they want to touch upon is the common financing on defense, and also seeing the second Trump administration with the 5% new guideline, which is a lot. Seeing what NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte said a few days ago in the European Parliament, that either we invest more or we need to take Russian classes or go to New Zealand. Of course, he was very plastic. But the fact is, these things are sufficient incentives to believe that we will have a super budget on defense, or we'll have a common financing based on the model that you, France and Germany, created with the recovery from the pandemic?
We are already twisting to a sort of war economy. We are slowly, and too slowly maybe, but we are twisting from a peace economy to some kind of war economy. So it's a movement. We should go faster, according to me. I agree.
Or put it like a deterrence economy, maybe, no?
I mean, war economy, that means we are not at war ourselves, but we are helping a country, which is a friendly country, a neighboring country, and who is at war. And so we have to adapt our industry and our armies to a situation of war in the neighborhood. So that's what I mean by war economy. Russia has already totally adapted, it shifted to a war economy, Ukraine of course, and we are, if we want to go on helping Ukraine, we have to shift ourselves to this kind of war or deterrence at the same time economy. That's for sure. So we have to sacrifice some things, holidays or consumption or luxury or I don't know what. And in every country we are going to do that movement, I guess.
You're referring with the question to this issue, you know, how to best finance the expenditures that are needed. I don't think that there is just this one perfect solution. We need the money, that's obvious. As I said before, it doesn't fall from the sky, as you've phrased it. You just cannot throw on the printing machine, print money, and then think that this will buy you something in a sustainable way. Whether each member state individually invests its own money into defense, or whether we all throw our money together and then pool the money, this is the discussion that's always going on in the European Union. In the end, there might be a mixture, I don't know. But the point is, we need to have the money first, so we need to make sure that our economic strength is beefed up. This is very crucial, coming back to the issue of competitiveness. And then, of course, just having money, whether individual countries' money or joint European money, is not enough if we cannot buy anything. So we need to put a great emphasis on establishing and further developing our European industrial base, European defense industry, which we of course now focus on. So these are elements that we are now focusing on, and the issue of, you know, how do we spend the money best by sharing, by individually spending, will remain to be seen. I'm sure that the issue of making more depth will be, of course, on the table, but this is something that this will be sorted out, right? But this is not enough just to focus on that. I think the industrial base issue is much more important.
To link the budget to the industrial base in order to have a, let's say, very good circular economy where you have the money, but you also buy European.
You buy European, that's...
Buying European with European money.
Absolutely. If you have European industrial defense industry champions, we have a few already, but we need more, and they need to broaden their industrial base. This is the way to go forward. By the way, also here, Romania is of course a partner for French, for German defense industries, because this country has a great tradition in defense industry, has the capacity to produce. So this is things we are working on. Very important in this context to make Europe strong.
And the fact that we have a strong relationship also in terms of military presence, like France is conducting and also leading the NATO group that it soon will become a brigade for this year, as I've understood, and also Germany is present here. Yeah. Also, that signals. Of course,
there is a link between the military aspect and the armament aspect. It's all linked, like Per said a few minutes ago. So we have to develop common programs or to produce here equipments that have been invented elsewhere, or to repair there, or to maintain there, and to develop progressively common equipments, ideally speaking. So to build a European industry of armament, of course.
For sure, Europe has proven how capable it is, because if we look at money, the same amount or maybe more money, the EU has supported Ukraine than the United States. In terms of financial weight, there are more than 130 billion euros that were poured in Ukraine, and what EU helped Ukraine on that. And also right now, Europe and European Union signals that it is ready to cover Ukraine needs if somehow the US stumbles after we see the new Trump administration. And at the same time, President Zelensky considers that European security guarantees without US umbrella are not enough. And from this point of view, do you think that Europe and the US will be on the same page when it comes to NATO, Ukraine, but also Russia and China, because we also need to deal with these two? And do you think that there is a momentum for peace talks in this year? You mentioned this prior in a few answers ago. There is a moment for these discussions, and how do you see the relationship with the US on that?
When it comes to the US, the new US administration, of course, we'll have to see how this plays out. We certainly will provide ideas from our end. We will certainly continue to be supportive of Ukraine. You're mentioning Zelensky pointing out that when it comes to a security umbrella, it's a bit of a different angle to simply supporting Ukraine. It comes to how do I guarantee a potential peace scenario or a ceasefire scenario. Then, of course, the US, given its military might, is a very, very crucial element from a Ukrainian perspective. Let's see how the things play out. We all know that various perceptions or expressions from the US administration, the incoming one, Trump saying I might solve this issue in 24 hours. I think the new line is a bit more broader. I think the new designated special envoy for Ukraine, General Kellogg, has spoken about, maybe this year, a few months. So we will see what drive the US administration can develop. I very strongly believe that this new incoming US administration will try to be a bold mover of things. We have seen it recently in the Middle East that already the looming incoming of a new administration might have be helpful for generating progress in a deal with regard to ceasefire and hostage release. So let's see how this plays out. I think there's a window of opportunity for moving ahead, but the conditions for finding a ceasefire solution, of course, will have to be worked out very precisely, and in particularly with Ukraine. You cannot decide on Ukraine without Ukraine. I think this would be a big mistake.
Yes, I think the Trump administration already understood before taking office that a quick deal, an easy deal, would be a tricky deal, and that they cannot reach that kind of solution very easily. But if there is a negotiation, it has to be with the Ukrainians, with us, the Europeans, because we will be part probably of the security guarantees offered to Ukraine. with hopefully the Americans themselves, and we will be all in the same boat. But there cannot be a deal like that between two persons somewhere apart from Ukraine or Europe. It is not possible. It is simply not possible. It will not work. Okay. It should not work.
We will be on the same boat, but how do we work on the same boat with a partner? And speaking about the United States, that somehow in some moment in time it put us on a reactive or defensive stance. And how do we build trust with the United States when someone like Elon Musk wants to play with Europe like his own backyard? And we've seen how he's discussing about Germany, about France, of course. And how do you do that?
We have to be strong, united, and Mr. Musk has not been elected by anybody, so he's just a businessman, and he has to respect the regulations of our national, our European regulations. I think he will, and it's part of communication. I mean, he's a man of communication, so it's part of, let's say, I'm not sure that show-off is the proper term, but it's some kind of setting situation of negotiations before getting in the negotiations. But when we will be in the negotiations, I'm sure he will be realistic.
We see a change in communication, absolutely. It's what you said. People have different communication styles, so the incoming administration has a different style in communicating. The key for us to make sure that our interests are met and respected is to be strong. This is very simple and very clear. We are working on that already. We have to do as much as we can. But if we are economically and militarily strong, then we will be a valuable partner. And we will make sure that any administration on the other side of the Atlantic will see the added value in cooperating with Europe.
Well, I must say that usually I did these types of interviews. The last question was usually the cherry on the top of the cake, and it was about Romania's accession into Schengen. But now, since we fulfilled Schengen and we are in Schengen, we don't have that question anymore. But still,
we worked hard.
That's right.
And thanks to France and Germany, Romania managed also to have this success. But I have to say that we've finished 2024 with a speech of President Steinmeier dissolving the parliament and calling for snap elections, where he mentioned a warning of malign and foreign interferences against democracies, citing Romania's elections and the annulment of the elections. While at the conference of ambassadors that you mentioned, President Macron invoked once again that that Romania's top court had to take an unprecedented move because of Russian foreign interference and state actor foreign interference. And as top diplomats of EU's most important members and partners of Romania, how do you assess what's happening now to and for Romania? And are you worried, or do you see Romania capable to wave down anti-NATO and anti-EU shocks?
Nobody has a guarantee for anything in terms of developing of an individual country. I wouldn't, think too much about worst case scenarios. I think Romania has proven over the years to be an extremely valuable and reliable and constructive NATO ally, EU partner and friend. Individually for France, for Germany, but of course also in NATO and EU. And every indication I have tells me that we are on a good track to continue to have Romania as a partner in this sense. This is absolutely important. Romania has, over the last years, I think, impressively improved its foreign policy standing. We've spoken about Schengen. I mean, this is a great success, well-deserved, should have come earlier. But okay, I mean, you had to work hard, you did your homework, and you were rewarded. CVM has been lifted a few years ago. OECD accession is on an excellent track. Romania is...
visa waiver now.
Visa waiver is, another check in the box. Romania is a sought-after partner when it comes to negotiating and talking about issues like the Black Sea and the Republic of Moldova and the developments in Ukraine. So this contrasts a bit the fact that there is an anti-governmental sentiment in Romania. You might wonder.
Discontent on the society, and we have the best moment in history.
Yeah, so it's a bit interesting why this development is nevertheless not fully acknowledged by more people. Why is this the case? I believe one element we've touched upon numerous times, malign interference from our enemies, Russia to name the firmest, which is twisting the truth, which is adding oil to the fire of maybe discontent here and there. But of course, there's also an element of politics on the national level, Romanian level, French, German level, but of course on a European level as well, having to address the needs of the people more. And I think simplification was the term you've used from President Macron's speech. We need to concentrate more on what's really relevant. We have put maybe a bit too much emphasis and focus on side topics. But right now is not the time for doing the whatever, maybe not so important things. Concentrate on security, on economy, on making sure that our democratic systems stay resilient and safe.
Yes, I would say just in a few words that I'm confident that Romania will not leave European Union or NATO, saying that the only country which lived European Union a few years ago is regretting it very much, very, very much.
Dear ambassadors, Ambassador Werneri, Ambassador Gebauer, thank you very much for the interview. Long live the Franco-German partnership and long live the partnership between the two countries and Romania. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.